Get this woman out of my lobby before she causes a scene.
Elliot Vance looked Mariah Bellamy up and down, his smile sharp and cruel.
You hear me? This is a corporate headquarters, not a place where anyone can wander in pretending they matter.
Mariah didn't move.
I have a meeting with Mr. Whitlock. He's expecting me shortly.
Graham doesn't meet with people like you without my permission.
The lobby went silent. Security stepped closer, uneasy.
Ma'am, please come with me.
Mariah's voice stayed calm.
You should call him first. You're making a mistake.
Elliot stepped toward her.
No, I'll tell you what's going to happen. You're going to stop embarrassing yourself, turn around, and leave my building.
He leaned closer, smiling.
Next time, learn which doors were never meant for you.
Elliot had no idea Mariah was the $340 million investor holding his company's last chance. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Dr. Mariah Bellamy stepped through the glass doors of Vance Meridian Technologies, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor of the downtown Chicago headquarters. The lobby stretched before her like a cathedral of corporate power, gleaming surfaces, soaring ceilings, and the kind of silence that money bought. She carried a slim leather portfolio containing preliminary documents for a $340 million rescue investment. Documents that could save this company from collapse. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the pristine space. Mariah wore a navy suit that fit perfectly, pearl earrings that caught the light, and the quiet confidence of someone who had built her fortune from nothing. She had dressed carefully for this meeting, not to impress, but to remind everyone in the room that respect was not negotiable. At 46, Mariah had learned to read rooms quickly. This lobby told her everything she needed to know about Vance Meridian's culture. Beautiful, but cold. Expensive, but empty. The kind of place where image mattered more than substance. She approached the curved reception desk where a young woman with blonde hair and nervous energy sat behind a computer screen. The nameplate read, Paige Naylor. Paige looked up with the practiced smile of someone trained to be pleasant to important people and dismissive to everyone else. "Good morning," Mariah said, her voice calm and clear. "I'm Dr. Mariah Bellamy. I have a confidential investor meeting with CEO Elliot Vance and CFO Graham Whitlock." Paige's fingers flew across the keyboard, her brow furrowing as she searched the appointment system. The smile faded into confusion, then mild irritation. "I'm sorry, but I don't see any meeting scheduled under that name. Are you sure you have the right day?" Mariah's expression remained patient. She had expected this. Graham had warned her the meeting was kept off the public calendar for obvious reasons. A $340 million rescue investment required discretion. The appointment was marked confidential. "Could you please call Mr. Whitlock's office?" Paige's tone shifted, becoming slightly patronizing. "Ma'am, all executive meetings go through the system, even confidential ones. Maybe you're thinking of a different company? The Meridian Hotel is about 6 blocks south if—" "I'm in the right place," Mariah interrupted gently. "Please call Graham Whitlock." Before Paige could respond, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. 3 men in expensive suits emerged, their voices carrying across the marble space. The man in the center commanded attention without trying. Tall, silver-haired, wearing confidence like armor. Elliot Vance. Mariah recognized him from the financial magazines, though he looked older in person. More tired around the eyes. Elliot was mid-conversation with the 2 executives flanking him, gesturing with the kind of animated authority that came from never being questioned. "Told the board we'd have answers by Friday. I don't care what it takes. We deliver." He stopped talking when he noticed Mariah standing near the executive elevators. His eyes narrowed, scanning her from head to toe with the cold assessment of someone deciding whether she belonged in his space. The calculation took seconds. His conclusion was immediate. "Can I help you?" The question sounded helpful, but his tone carried an edge, a challenge disguised as courtesy. Mariah turned to face him fully, maintaining eye contact. "I'm Dr. Mariah Bellamy. I'm here for the investor meeting." Elliot's eyebrows shot up, and a laugh escaped before he could stop it. Not a pleasant laugh, the kind that cut. "The investor meeting?" He glanced at his executives, who shifted uncomfortably. "I think there's been some confusion. The investor meeting is private." "I understand that," Mariah replied evenly. "I'm Mariah Bellamy from Bellamy Equity Partners." But Elliot wasn't listening anymore. His assumption had calcified into certainty. This woman, this black woman in his lobby, could not possibly be the investor his company desperately needed. The mathematics of his prejudice were simple and absolute. "Look, I don't know what game you're playing here," Elliot said, his voice rising slightly. Several employees had emerged from side corridors, drawn by the unusual tension in their normally quiet lobby. Phones began lifting discreetly. "But you can't just walk into a Fortune 500 company and pretend to be someone important." Mariah felt the familiar burn of humiliation rising in her chest, but her voice remained steady. "Mr. Vance, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," Elliot cut her off, "is you thinking you can bluff your way upstairs." He turned toward the security desk where Darius Cole stood watching with growing unease. Darius was a former military police officer, disciplined and observant. Something about this confrontation felt wrong to him, but orders were orders. The lobby had gone completely silent now. Even Paige had stopped typing. Everyone could feel the electricity in the air, the moment when power and prejudice collided with consequences neither side could predict. Elliot pointed directly at Mariah, his finger cutting through the space between them like a blade. "Get her out before she causes trouble." Darius Cole felt his stomach tighten as he stepped away from the security desk. His black leather shoes made soft sounds against the marble floor as he approached Mariah. 23 years of military service had taught him to follow orders, but something about this situation made his instincts scream warnings. The woman standing near the executive elevators carried herself with the kind of quiet authority that came from real power, not pretense. "Ma'am," Darius said softly, his voice respectful but firm, "I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." Mariah turned to face him, and he saw no panic in her dark eyes, only disappointment. "Mr. Vance," she said, speaking past Darius to address Elliot directly, "you are making a serious mistake." The words hung in the air like a final warning. But Elliot was too deep into his performance now, too invested in demonstrating his authority in front of his staff. His face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. Having this woman, this intruder, speak to him with such calm certainty only made him more furious. "A mistake?" Elliot's voice echoed off the marble walls. "The only mistake is you thinking you can walk into my building and lie about who you are." He gestured wildly at the gathering employees. "This is trespassing, pure and simple. You're pretending to be important, and I won't tolerate it." More staff members had emerged from the elevator banks and side corridors, drawn by the commotion. They clustered near the massive marble columns that supported the lobby's soaring ceiling, their faces a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. Several younger employees had their phones out, recording the confrontation with nervous excitement. The corporate hierarchy they lived within made choosing sides dangerous, so they watched in silence. Paige, behind the reception desk, stared down at her computer screen, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. She could feel the weight of her earlier dismissive treatment of this woman pressing down on her shoulders. But speaking up now would mean contradicting her CEO in front of everyone. The risk was too great. She kept her eyes lowered and said nothing. Darius placed a gentle hand on Mariah's arm, just above her elbow. His touch was professional, careful, the contact of a man who understood the difference between necessary force and brutality. "Ma'am, please don't make this harder than it has to be." But Elliot wasn't satisfied with gentle. He barked across the lobby, his voice sharp with command. "Cole, she's a security threat. Treat her like one. The words hit Darius like a slap. In the military, he had been trained to assess real threats. This composed woman in her tailored navy suit posed no danger to anyone except perhaps Elliot's ego. But direct orders from the CEO in front of witnesses left him no choice. He tightened his grip on Mariah's arm. Mariah felt the change immediately. The respectful escort had become something harder, more forceful. But she refused to beg. She had built a fortune by never surrendering her dignity, and she would not start now. "I was invited here," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the marble expanse. "Graham Whitlock arranged this meeting. He can confirm my identity and my appointment." Elliot let out a harsh laugh that made several employees flinch. "Graham Whitlock? Our CFO?" He shook his head in mock disbelief. "Graham would never arrange a meeting with someone like you without my knowledge." "Nice try." The phrase, "someone like you," landed with brutal precision. Everyone in the lobby understood exactly what he meant. The subtext became text. The implication became accusation. Mariah's race, her presence, her very existence in this space had been reduced to a stereotype in Elliot's mind. Darius began walking Mariah toward the front doors, his training warring with his conscience. Each step felt heavier than the last. Behind them, Elliot's voice grew more triumphant, feeding off the audience he had created. "Get her out of here before she tries another story," Elliot commanded. "And Cole, call the police. I want her charged with trespassing." The elevator chimed softly. Then its doors burst open like an explosion. Graham Whitlock rushed out in complete panic. Graham Whitlock burst from the elevator like a man fleeing a burning building. His usually perfect silver hair was disheveled, his tie askew, and a manila folder clutched against his chest was spilling papers across the marble floor. His face was flushed red with panic and exertion. "Stop!" he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. "Everyone stop right now!" The entire lobby froze. Darius's hand remained on Mariah's arm, but his grip loosened instinctively. Employees who had been watching the drama unfold stood motionless, their phones still recording. Even Elliot turned toward his CFO with a mixture of confusion and irritation. Graham stumbled forward, nearly tripping over his own feet in his haste to reach them. More papers scattered from his folder, financial projections and investment documents floating down like fallen leaves. His chest heaved as he struggled to catch his breath. "She's our investor!" Graham shouted, pointing directly at Mariah. "She's Dr. Mariah Bellamy! She's the $340 million investor we've been waiting for!" The words hit the lobby like a physical force. Complete silence fell over the space, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of Chicago traffic outside the glass walls. Elliot's confident smirk vanished from his face, as if it had been surgically removed. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again without sound. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving him pale and suddenly smaller than he had appeared moments before. Around the lobby, employees began to understand what they had just witnessed. The woman their CEO had ordered dragged out by security was the same woman who held the power to save their jobs, their health care benefits, their mortgages, their children's college funds. The investor whose money could prevent layoffs and keep their company from collapse had been publicly humiliated in front of them all. Some employees covered their mouths in shock. Others looked down at their phones, realizing they had recorded their CEO's career suicide in real time. The two executives who had been standing behind Elliot took subtle steps backward, distancing themselves from the disaster. Graham reached Mariah and Darius, his breathing still ragged. "Dr. Bellamy, I am so deeply sorry. I am so incredibly sorry." He looked at Darius with pleading eyes. "Please, please let her go immediately." Darius released Mariah's arm as if it had become electrified. He stepped back, his professional composure intact, but his eyes troubled. He had been ordered to treat a billionaire investor like a common criminal. Graham turned back to Mariah, his hands shaking as he tried to gather the scattered papers. Your appointment was kept off the public calendar for confidentiality reasons. The merger talks, the investment details, we couldn't risk any leaks to the market before the announcement. That's why the reception desk didn't have your name. That's why security wasn't informed. Mariah stood perfectly still, her composure unbroken despite everything that had happened. Her navy suit remained immaculate, her leather portfolio still clutched in her free hand, her pearl earrings catching the lobby's recessed lighting. But her dark eyes held something new now, a cold assessment that made several watching employees shiver. She looked directly at Elliot, who remained frozen near the marble pillars like a statue of his former confidence. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly across the silent lobby, each word precise and devastating. The problem was not the calendar, Mr. Vance. The problem was that you never asked who I was. Elliot's mouth worked silently for several seconds before he managed to speak. Dr. Bellamy, this is just a terrible misunderstanding. A communication breakdown between departments. These things happen in large organizations. No, Mariah said, her voice cutting through his excuses like a blade. A misunderstanding is when someone gets directions wrong. This was a decision. You looked at me and decided I didn't belong here. You decided I was lying. You decided I was a threat. You made those choices without asking a single question. Graham continued gathering papers from the floor, his movements frantic and apologetic. Dr. Bellamy, please. We can go upstairs immediately. The boardroom is ready. The contracts are prepared. We can handle this situation properly. Elliot stepped forward, forcing what he clearly hoped was a charming smile. Absolutely. Let's put this unfortunate incident behind us and focus on the incredible partnership we're building together. Mariah remained motionless for a long moment, studying Elliot's face. The entire lobby held its breath, waiting for her decision. Would she walk away? Would she cancel the investment that could save thousands of jobs? Would she let Elliot's prejudice destroy everything? Finally, she spoke again, her voice steady and controlled. I will continue with this meeting, but not because I accept your apology, Mr. Vance, and not because I'm willing to pretend this didn't happen. She paused, letting her words sink in. I'm going upstairs because there are thousands of workers and dozens of hospitals that depend on the stability this investment can provide. I will not let your behavior punish them. Graham nearly collapsed with relief. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Bellamy. The elevator is right here. Mariah walked toward the elevator with the same composed dignity she had maintained throughout the entire ordeal. Graham rushed ahead to press the call button, still clutching his scattered papers and shooting grateful glances in her direction. As the elevator doors opened, Mariah stepped inside with Graham. Elliot followed behind them, his forced smile tight and brittle, fury burning behind his eyes, despite his attempt to appear gracious. The doors began to close on a lobby full of stunned employees and one security guard who was questioning every order he had ever followed. The elevator climbed silently to the 32nd floor, its polished walls reflecting the tension between the three occupants. Graham clutched his papers, stealing nervous glances at Mariah. Elliot stared straight ahead, his jaw tight with barely contained anger. Mariah watched the floor numbers change, her expression unreadable. When the doors opened, they stepped into a hallway lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago's skyline. Graham led them toward massive oak doors at the end of the corridor. The executive boardroom, he said quietly. Everyone is waiting. Inside, the room commanded attention with its gleaming conference table, leather chairs, and walls displaying awards and corporate achievements. 5 people sat around the table, their faces tense with anticipation. At the head sat Vivian Stokes, the board chair, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair pulled into a perfect chignon and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Dr. Bellamy, Vivian said, rising gracefully, welcome to Vance Meridian Technologies. We are so pleased you could join us today. Mariah shook hands with each board member as Graham made introductions. Their names blurred together, directors of marketing, operations, legal affairs, but their expressions were identical. Desperate hope mixed with barely concealed panic. Elliot took his seat at the opposite end of the table from Vivian, gesturing for Mariah to sit to his right. She chose a chair across from him instead, placing her leather portfolio on the polished surface. "Before we begin," Elliot said, his voice smooth and practiced, "I want to address the unfortunate confusion in our lobby today. Dr. Bellamy, please accept my sincere apologies for the miscommunication regarding your arrival. Our security protocols are designed to protect our proprietary information and ensure confidentiality for high-level meetings like this one. Sometimes those procedures can create awkward situations for our valued partners." The directors nodded along, their relief visible as Elliot delivered what sounded like a reasonable explanation. Vivian watched Mariah's face carefully, searching for signs of acceptance or forgiveness. Mariah said nothing. She opened her portfolio and removed a single sheet of paper, placing it face down on the table. Graham cleared his throat. "Dr. Bellamy, let me outline our current situation so you understand the urgency of this partnership." He activated a wall-mounted display showing charts and financial projections. "Our healthcare platform serves 43 hospitals across 7 states. The software manages patient records, treatment protocols, and medication tracking for over 200,000 people." The numbers painted a grim picture. Revenue had dropped 30% in 6 months. The latest software update had created system failures that frustrated doctors and endangered patient care. Hospitals were threatening to cancel contracts. Lenders were demanding immediate debt payments. "We have until Friday to provide proof of new capital injection," Graham continued, his voice strained. "Without your investment, we face bankruptcy proceedings within 2 weeks." One of the directors leaned forward. "Dr. Bellamy, thousands of jobs are at stake. Not just here, but in every hospital that depends on our platform. Nurses, technicians, administrators, they all need us to stay operational." Vivian clasped her hands together. "We understand this is a significant commitment on your part, but time is absolutely critical. Our legal team has prepared all necessary documents for your signature today." The room fell silent as everyone waited for Mariah to respond. Elliot's smile was confident, but his eyes were cold. Graham looked like a man watching his life's work crumble. The directors sat frozen, barely breathing. Mariah finally spoke, her voice calm and measured. "I understand the urgency. I also understand that desperate companies sometimes hide problems from potential investors." She turned over the paper she had placed on the table. "Before I release $340 million, I require a 72-hour independent review." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "What kind of review?" Vivian asked carefully. "Financial audit, executive conduct examination, investigation of any retaliation complaints filed against company leadership." Mariah looked directly at Elliot. "If this company is as healthy as you claim, transparency should be welcome." Elliot's composure cracked slightly. "Dr. Bellamy, with respect, we don't have 72 hours. Our lenders won't wait. The market won't wait. Every day we delay is another hospital that might switch to our competitors. Then you should have considered that before having me dragged through your lobby like a criminal," Mariah replied evenly. Graham's face showed a flicker of relief. Someone was finally demanding accountability. But Vivian looked alarmed, calculating the risks of delayed funding against the dangers of outside scrutiny. "Surely we can address any concerns through internal channels," Vivian suggested. "Our compliance department maintains excellent records. Our HR policies exceed industry standards." "I'm sure they do," Mariah said, "so proving it shouldn't be difficult." Elliot leaned forward, his voice taking on an edge. "You're asking us to risk everything on a fishing expedition. We need commitment, not conditions. We need partnership, not interrogation." "You need my money," Mariah said simply. "And a company that desperately needs my money should be transparent enough to earn it." The silence stretched uncomfortably. Graham stared at his papers, afraid to meet anyone's eyes. The directors exchanged worried glances. Vivian's fingers drummed silently against the table. Finally, Elliot forced another smile. Of course. Transparency is important. We can certainly arrange some level of review, though 72 hours seems excessive for a company of our reputation. My reputation was also excellent until today, Mariah replied. Yet that didn't stop you from assuming I was a threat to be removed. She stood, closing her portfolio with a decisive snap. You have my terms. When you're ready to meet them, Mr. Whitlock has my contact information. As Mariah walked toward the boardroom doors, a young woman stepped out from behind a column near the hallway entrance. She was professionally dressed, carrying a tablet, with nervous energy that suggested she had been waiting for this exact moment. Dr. Bellamy, the woman said quietly. I'm Talia Monroe, Junior Executive Assistant. Could I speak with you alone? Talia glanced over her shoulder before speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. What happened downstairs wasn't new. It was just the first time it happened to someone they couldn't afford to ignore. Mariah studied the young woman carefully. Talia's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her tablet, but her eyes held a determination that reminded Mariah of herself 20 years ago. Tell me, Mariah said simply. Talia looked down the hallway again, making sure they were alone. 3 months ago, Marcus Williams from accounting questioned some vendor payments that didn't make sense. 2 weeks later, his performance review was suddenly full of problems that never existed before. He was demoted to a junior position and transferred to a different floor. She swiped her tablet screen, showing Mariah a screenshot. This is the original review his supervisor wrote. Glowing. And this is the one that went into his file after he asked questions about the money. The difference was stark. The second review contained criticisms that contradicted the first entirely. How did you get both versions? Mariah asked. I keep backups of everything I handle, Talia said. I learned early that powerful people deny everything unless you have proof. She scrolled to another screen. Janet Rodriguez from HR filed a complaint about executives making jokes about her accent during meetings. The complaint disappeared from the system 3 days later. When she asked about it, she was told there was no record of any filing. Mariah felt her jaw tighten. But you have the original. I photographed it before it vanished. Talia's voice grew stronger. Dr. Bellamy, there are dozens of these cases. Older workers suddenly getting impossible assignments. Black employees having their ideas credited to white colleagues. Anyone who speaks up gets labeled as not a culture fit. The hallway felt smaller as the weight of systematic abuse became clear. This wasn't one CEO having a bad day. This was institutional poison. There's more, Talia continued, pulling up an email thread. Yesterday morning, before you arrived, Elliot sent a message to his senior staff. He said a major investor named Bellamy was coming, but he called your investment group desperate money from people who don't understand our business. Mariah's composure remained steady, but inside, anger burned cold and bright. Talia scrolled further. He also wrote this. Some diversity hire probably set up the meeting thinking they could play in the big leagues. Graham needs to handle this quickly, so we can get back to real business. The email was time-stamped 2 hours before Mariah had walked into the lobby. He knew, Mariah said quietly. He knew someone named Bellamy was the investor. He just couldn't imagine it might actually be you. Talia met Mariah's eyes. To him, successful black women don't exist unless they're serving coffee or cleaning offices. Mariah absorbed this revelation in silence. The lobby humiliation hadn't been a mistake or misunderstanding. It had been the natural result of assumptions so deep Elliot couldn't see past them, even when his company's survival depended on it. Why are you showing me this? Mariah asked. Because what happened to you happens to us every day. The only difference is we can't walk away with $300 million. Talia's voice wavered slightly. If you expose him, maybe the rest of us get a chance to breathe. This could cost you your job, Mariah warned. Staying quiet already cost me my dignity, Talia replied. And if this company collapses because Elliot drove away the one person who could save it, I'll lose my job anyway. Meanwhile, 7 floors above, Elliot paced behind his mahogany desk, while his inner circle sat in uncomfortable silence. His chief of staff, David Park, watched nervously as the CEO's face grew redder with each step. The lobby video needs to disappear, Elliot snapped. All copies, security cameras, phones, everything. I don't care what it costs. Sir, David said carefully, deleting evidence could create legal problems if— Legal problems? Elliot's voice rose. That woman is the legal problem. She thinks she can waltz in here and humiliate me in front of my own employees? Marketing Director Sandra Hayes shifted in her chair. The investment would stabilize our debt situation. Maybe we should focus on smoothing things over rather than— She doesn't get to demand audits and reviews like she owns this place. Elliot cut her off. I built this company. I decide who gets access. I decide who belongs. He turned to face the group. Find out who talked to her after the meeting. Someone gave her information. Someone is feeding her ammunition to use against us. David made notes reluctantly. What about the 72-hour review she requested? Stall her. Tell her we're considering it while we arrange alternative financing. Make her think she has leverage while we find another way forward. Elliot's smile was cold. By the time she realizes what's happening, we won't need her money anymore. HR Director Patricia Bell spoke up. Sir, if she's recorded any evidence of discrimination, federal investigators might— There is no discrimination, Elliot said sharply. There are high standards and people who can't meet them. There's a difference. He walked to his floor-to-ceiling windows and looked down at the street below. In the marble lobby, Mariah shook Talia's hand and walked calmly toward the front doors. Her steps were measured, her expression composed, but everyone who watched could sense the shift in power. Darius nodded respectfully as she passed his security desk. Paige looked up from her computer with nervous guilt. Several employees paused their conversations to watch. Mariah pushed through the glass doors without looking back. From his window, Elliot watched her climb into a black town car. His reflection stared back at him, distorted by the afternoon light. He placed his palm against the cool glass and whispered, "She will not take my company." That same evening, Mariah returned to her hotel suite overlooking downtown Chicago and received calls from concerned partners. The 32nd floor suite offered a panoramic view of the city's glittering skyline, but Mariah barely noticed the lights reflecting off Lake Michigan as her phone buzzed continuously on the marble coffee table. Her business partner, Michael Torres, called first. "Mariah, have you seen the Chicago Business Journal website?" His voice carried tension she rarely heard from the normally calm attorney. "There's a story about your meeting today." Mariah pulled up the article on her laptop. The headline made her jaw tighten. Investor disrupts private meeting, makes hostile demands at healthcare tech giant. She read aloud. Sources close to Vance Meridian Technologies report that Dr. Mariah Bellamy of Bellamy Equity Partners disrupted a scheduled corporate meeting Tuesday evening, making aggressive financial demands and threatening company leadership when security attempted to resolve a scheduling misunderstanding. "This is complete fiction," Mariah said quietly. "The article claims you became confrontational when asked to provide proper identification," Michael continued. "It says you demanded immediate access to confidential financial records and threatened to withdraw funding unless given unprecedented control over company operations." Mariah scrolled through the story. Every detail had been twisted. Her calm request for identification became aggressive demands. Elliot's humiliation became a scheduling misunderstanding. Her ethical review request became a hostile takeover attempt. Her phone rang again. Patricia Williams from the Teachers' Pension Fund. "Mariah, we're getting calls from reporters asking about your investment strategy. Someone leaked that you're involved with Vance Meridian." The coverage makes it sound like you're forcing your way into companies that don't want your involvement. Another call. Another concerned partner. Another investor questioning whether Mariah's reputation could damage their shared portfolios. By 9 o'clock, she had fielded 12 calls from allies who believed her but worried about perception in the financial press. They're rewriting the story before anyone can verify what really happened, she told Michael during their final call of the evening. Elliot is covering his tracks while the evidence is still fresh. Across town at Vance Meridian headquarters, Elliot stood in Vivian Stokes's corner office on the 28th floor. The board chair poured herself a glass of wine while reviewing the online coverage. "The article presents our side professionally," Vivian said, though her voice lacked conviction. "But attacking a major investor carries risks, Elliot. If this backfires—" "She's not a major investor," Elliot interrupted. "She's an opportunist who saw our temporary difficulties and decided to exploit them. The woman walked into our building making demands like she already owned us." Vivian studied his face. "Graham says her financing would stabilize our debt within 60 days. Graham doesn't understand business strategy. He sees numbers on spreadsheets, not the bigger picture." Elliot moved to the windows overlooking the Chicago River. "Mariah Bellamy wants control, not partnership. She demanded audits, reviews, personnel changes. That's not investment. That's conquest. The board needs stability, Elliot. Our stock price dropped 8% this week alone, which is exactly why we can't let her dictate terms. If word spreads that we're so desperate, we'll accept hostile conditions from any investor who shows up. Every vulture in the market will circle us." Vivian set down her wine glass. "What are you proposing?" "Alternative financing. I have contacts at 3 private equity firms. We can structure a deal that protects our independence and avoids her ultimatums." 2 floors below, Graham Whitlock sat in his office reviewing quarterly reports when Elliot appeared in his doorway. "We need to discuss the Bellamy situation," Elliot said, closing the door behind him. Graham looked up wearily. "She's offering exactly what we need, Elliot. $340 million in immediate capital with reasonable terms. Why are we fighting this? Because reasonable terms don't include demands for executive removals and company-wide audits." Elliot sat across from Graham's desk. "She's using our financial pressure to force changes that have nothing to do with investment returns. Maybe some changes are overdue." Elliot's expression hardened. "That sounds dangerously close to disloyalty, Graham. I hope you remember who approved your position here." Graham felt the familiar knot in his stomach that came whenever Elliot issued veiled threats. "I'm thinking about the company's survival." "Then think about this. If you undermine my authority during these negotiations, I'll remember that when we restructure executive positions next quarter." The message was clear. Support Elliot or lose everything. After Elliot left, Graham stared at the financial projections on his monitor. Without Mariah's investment, the company would face bankruptcy within 90 days. With it, they could stabilize and grow. But Elliot seemed more concerned with winning than surviving. Meanwhile, Darius Cole sat in his apartment kitchen, still wearing his security uniform from the afternoon shift. His wife Carmen was upstairs resting after her 3rd physical therapy session following knee surgery. His phone buzzed with a text from David Park, Elliot's chief of staff. "Need to see you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Building security office. Important." At 7:30 the next morning, Darius entered the small security office on the 2nd floor of Vance Meridian headquarters. David Park waited with a manila folder and a serious expression. "This is about yesterday's incident in the lobby," David said without preamble. "We need to document exactly what happened for our legal team." He opened the folder and pulled out a typed statement. "This is a standard report form. I need you to read it and sign at the bottom." Darius read slowly. "Security Incident Report. Dr. Mariah Bellamy refused to provide identification when requested by reception staff. Subject became agitated when asked to wait and demanded immediate access to executive offices. When security attempted to verify her appointment, subject raised her voice and made threatening statements about company leadership. Security escort was necessary to maintain lobby safety and professional atmosphere. Every word was a lie. Darius looked up. This isn't what happened. It's what our legal team needs for documentation purposes. The exact details aren't as important as protecting the company from liability claims. She identified herself clearly. She wasn't agitated. She didn't raise her voice or make threats. David's tone hardened. Darius, your job here provides health insurance for your wife's recovery. Your pension is tied to 15 years of service. I'd hate to see administrative issues affect your employment record. Darius stared at the false statement, knowing his signature could ruin an innocent woman. The next morning, Talia Monroe swiped her badge at the Vance Meridian entrance and felt a moment of relief when the turnstile clicked open. At least they hadn't fired her overnight. But when she reached her desk on the 15th floor and opened her laptop, the screen displayed a message that made her stomach drop. Account access restricted. Contact IT support for assistance. She tried logging into the company email system. Same message. The file servers where she kept her documentation blocked. Talia walked quickly to the IT help desk, trying to appear calm while her pulse hammered in her ears. My login isn't working this morning, she told Marcus, the senior technician. Marcus typed her employee ID into his system and frowned. Shows here that your account is under security review. Should be temporary. Security review for what? Doesn't say. You'll need to talk to HR. 20 minutes later, Talia sat across from Janet Walsh, the HR director, in a windowless conference room that smelled like industrial carpet and anxiety. This is just routine, Janet explained, not making eye contact. We're auditing access permissions across several departments. Your account will be restored once the review is complete. How long will that take? Hard to say. Could be a few days, maybe longer. Talia knew this was retaliation for talking to Mariah. The timing was too convenient. Is this related to the investor meeting yesterday? Janet's expression tightened. I'm not sure what you mean. I think you know exactly what I mean. Talia, I'd recommend focusing on your current assignments rather than speculating about company business that doesn't concern you. Back at her desk, Talia pulled out her personal phone and texted Mariah. My computer access is blocked. They're calling it a security audit, but files may be disappearing. Can you help? The response came within 5 minutes. My attorney is driving over now. Don't delete anything from your personal devices. Save everything you can legally. Across town, Darius Cole stared at the false statement David Park had placed in front of him. The lies felt like acid on the page. I'm not signing this, Darius said quietly. David's friendly mask dropped completely. Let me be more direct. Your wife needs those physical therapy sessions, right? Expensive treatments. And your pension after 15 years of service? That's your retirement security. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining reality. Administrative issues can affect employment records. Performance concerns can impact benefit eligibility. These things happen when employees don't support company interests. Darius thought about Carmen upstairs in bed, still recovering from surgery. The medical bills, the mortgage, 15 years of steady work that could disappear if he made the wrong choice. But he also thought about the dignity in Mariah's eyes as she was dragged through the lobby, the quiet way she had refused to beg or make a scene. She didn't do anything wrong, he said. That's not the point. The point is protecting this company from legal liability. Your signature shows you're a team player. Darius pushed the paper back across the desk. Find another way to protect the company. At the downtown offices of Bellamy Equity Partners, Graham Whitlock slipped through the reception area like a man sneaking into confession. He carried a thin folder containing financial summaries he had carefully extracted from the company's confidential records. Mariah's assistant led him into her office, where she sat behind a glass desk reviewing documents with her attorney, Nadine Porter. Graham, Mariah said without warmth, you look nervous. I have reason to be. He placed the folder on her desk. These are high-level financial overviews. Nothing that violates confidentiality agreements. but enough to show you what we're dealing with. Nadine examined the papers. She was a sharp-featured woman in her 50s, with silver hair and the demeanor of someone who had spent decades fighting corporate misconduct. "Interesting," she said. "Your debt structure shows some unusual vendor relationships. These consulting fees seem inflated." Graham's hands trembled slightly. "There are irregularities that the board hasn't been fully briefed on." "Such as?" "Elliot has been moving money through shell contracts. Some of the crisis we're facing isn't just market pressure. It's been accelerated by questionable spending decisions." Mariah leaned forward. "Are you saying he's been stealing?" "I'm saying the books don't match what the board thinks they approved." Nadine made notes on a legal pad. "We'll need documentation for the independent review team." "They arrived this morning," Graham said. "Elliot is furious. He's been screaming at department heads all day, demanding to know who authorized outside auditors to access company files." Back at Vance Meridian headquarters, the independent review team had set up operations in a conference room on the 20th floor. Led by forensic accountant Patricia Hayes, the team methodically worked through financial records while employees whispered nervously in hallways. Talia managed to intercept Nadine Porter near the elevators. "I'm Talia Monroe. Mariah said you were coming." "Ms. Porter, I understand you have documentation we need to preserve. I forwarded key emails to my personal legal counsel this morning before my access was completely locked. Performance reviews that were altered. Messages showing retaliation against employees who complained. Evidence of the pattern Mariah experienced. Smart thinking. We'll coordinate with your counsel to ensure everything is properly protected." As they spoke, Elliot emerged from the elevator with his chief of staff. He saw Talia talking to an unfamiliar woman in a business suit, and his expression darkened. "Ms. Monroe," he called out sharply. "I need to see you in my office, now." Nadine handed Talia her card. "Call me if you need legal support." In Elliot's office, the CEO paced behind his desk like a caged animal. "Who was that woman you were speaking with?" "A visitor." "Don't lie to me. I know Mariah Bellamy sent lawyers into this building." "I wouldn't know about that." Elliot slammed his palm on the desk. "You think you're clever, don't you? Feeding information to outsiders, undermining this company's leadership. I haven't done anything wrong." "You've done everything wrong." He picked up his phone and dialed security. "I need an escort to remove Talia Monroe from the premises immediately." An hour later, as the sun set behind the Chicago skyline, Talia walked slowly through the lobby, carrying a small cardboard box containing her personal items. 2 security guards flanked her, just as they had flanked Mariah 24 hours earlier. Employees gathered near the marble columns, watching in fearful silence. Some held phones but were too intimidated to record. Paige, the receptionist, kept her eyes fixed on her computer screen, unable to look at another woman being humiliated in the same space. Darius stood by the front entrance, his jaw tight with anger. When Talia reached the doors, he spoke quietly. "This isn't right." Talia looked back at him with tired eyes. "No, it isn't." As the glass doors closed behind her, Talia pulled out her phone and called Mariah. "They threw me out," she said simply. "Just like they did to you." That evening, Mariah sat across from 3 people in a private conference room at the Palmer House Hotel. The mahogany table was covered with financial documents, laptops, and legal pads filled with notes. Patricia Hayes, the forensic accountant, adjusted her reading glasses and pointed to a series of highlighted transactions on her laptop screen. These payments caught my attention immediately. Large sums moving through consulting vendors, but the work descriptions are vague. Graham leaned forward, his face pale. "I approved some of those." Elliot said they were emergency consulting fees to stabilize the software platform. "The problem is the recipients," Patricia continued. 3 different vendor names, but they all trace back to the same registered address. A shell company called Northbridge Consulting Solutions. Nadine Porter looked up from her legal pad. Northbridge? That name appeared in the emails Talia preserved. Elliot mentioned it in private messages to his chief of staff. Mariah studied the financial timeline. How much money are we talking about? Over the past 6 months, approximately $12 million, all routed through these fake consulting contracts. Patricia scrolled through additional screens. The board never approved these payments individually. They were buried in broader emergency spending authorizations. Graham ran his hands through his gray hair. I knew we had cash flow problems. I knew the software launch was bleeding money. But I didn't know funds were being diverted. The pattern suggests systematic fraud, Nadine said. Money moves out through fake vendors while the company claims it needs emergency investment to survive. Patricia pulled up another document. This is where it gets worse. The consulting contracts all include language about intellectual property transfer and asset liquidation. If Vance Meridian defaults on these payments, the vendors have legal claim to company patents. The room fell silent. He's setting up a trap, Mariah said quietly. Create fake debt, claim the company is desperate, then use that debt to seize valuable assets when it collapses. Graham stared at the evidence in front of him. Elliot told me we were fighting to keep the company alive, but he was planning to gut it all along. Across town in her Lincoln Park penthouse, Vivian Stokes paced beside floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Her phone had been ringing for 2 hours with calls from panicked board members. The stock dropped 8% after that leaked article. Board member Robert Kim said through the speaker, "Investors are asking questions about leadership stability." "I understand the concern," Vivian replied, "but we have to be careful not to make hasty decisions based on one incident." One incident. A potential investor was nearly arrested in our lobby. The optics are terrible. Another voice joined the call. Board member Susan Martinez. "Is it true Bellamy is demanding an investigation before she releases funds? She wants a brief review period. It's not unusual for investments of this magnitude." "Brief? The market doesn't wait for internal reviews, Vivian. We need capital now or we lose credibility with our remaining creditors." Before Vivian could respond, her assistant knocked on the door. "Ms. Stokes, Mr. Vance is here. He says it's urgent." Elliot entered Vivian's living room with the confidence of a man who believed he held all the cards. He carried a leather folder and wore the smile that had charmed boards and investors for years. "I have good news," he announced. "I've secured alternative financing." Vivian ended the conference call and turned to face him. "Alternative to Bellamy?" "Northbridge Capital. They specialize in healthcare technology turnarounds. They can provide the same level of funding without the delays and conditions Bellamy is demanding." "I've never heard of Northbridge Capital." "They're a private firm, very discreet. They understand that speed matters more than bureaucratic reviews." Elliot placed the folder on her coffee table. "They're prepared to sign tomorrow morning." Vivian opened the folder and scanned the term sheet. The numbers looked impressive, but something felt wrong. "This seems too convenient, Elliot. A major private equity firm appears overnight just when we need them. That's how business works when you have relationships. Northbridge has been watching our company for months. They see the value that Mariah Bellamy is too paranoid to appreciate. What about the review she's conducting? We cancel it. We announce the Northbridge partnership and move forward. The market responds positively, our creditors relax, and we avoid the spectacle of having an outsider investigate our internal operations." Vivian studied Elliot's face. He looked confident, but there was something desperate beneath the polish. "And if Bellamy objects?" "She can object all she wants. But if we have funding secured, her opinion becomes irrelevant." Back at the Palmer house, Mariah stared at the evidence Patricia had compiled. The shell companies, the fake consulting contracts, the hidden debt arrangements, it all pointed to one devastating conclusion. She looked directly at Graham. "Your CEO isn't trying to save this company. He's preparing to strip it." The morning sunlight streamed through the glass walls of the Vance Meridian lobby, casting long shadows across the marble floor where Mariah had been humiliated just 3 days earlier. Now Elliot Vance stood in the exact same spot, facing a small crowd of financial reporters and camera crews. He wore his best navy suit, and his most confident smile. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to announce that Vance Meridian Technologies has secured emergency financing through our partnership with Northbridge Capital, Elliot said into the cluster of microphones. This investment will stabilize our operations, protect jobs, and ensure our healthcare platforms continue serving hospitals nationwide. A reporter from the Chicago Tribune raised her hand. What about Dr. Mariah Bellamy's investment offer? Sources say she was conducting a review of your company. Elliot's smile never wavered. Dr. Bellamy presented certain terms that would have delayed critical funding while our creditors and patients waited. Northbridge Capital understands that in healthcare technology, speed saves lives. Another reporter called out, "Is it true there was an incident in this lobby involving Dr. Bellamy?" There was a miscommunication about scheduling that was quickly resolved. Dr. Bellamy was treated with complete professionalism. Elliot gestured to the lobby around him. As you can see, this is a welcoming space for all legitimate visitors. The reporters scribbled notes. Several nodded approvingly at Elliot's composed responses. From the upper floors, employees pressed against the windows to watch the press conference. Their faces showed defeat rather than relief. Many had hoped Mariah's investigation would change things. Now it seemed their CEO had outmaneuvered her completely. Talia Monroe watched from the street outside, no longer able to enter the building. She pulled out her phone and called Mariah. "He's announcing the Northbridge deal right where he humiliated you," she said quietly. "The reporters are eating it up." In her hotel suite, Mariah listened to the press conference through a live stream while Nadine Porter sat across from her with a laptop open. Dr. Bellamy was treated with complete professionalism, Elliot's voice echoed from the phone speakers. Mariah's expression remained calm. She had learned long ago not to waste energy on anger when precision was more powerful. Her phone rang. Elliot's number appeared on the screen. She answered without greeting. "I trust you're watching the announcement," Elliot said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Northbridge is prepared to sign this afternoon. Your services are no longer needed." "I see. You may exit these negotiations properly this time. Through the front door, like a professional." Mariah said nothing for several seconds. Elliot clearly expected her to rage or beg. Instead, she spoke in the same measured tone she had used in the lobby. "Mr. Vance, I appreciate you calling to update me personally. I wanted to be courteous. That's thoughtful. I assume the board has reviewed Northbridge's complete terms? The board trusts my judgment on strategic partnerships." "Of course they do." Mariah paused. "Enjoy your press conference." She hung up. Nadine looked up from her laptop. "He sounds confident." "Confidence isn't the same as competence." Mariah walked to the window overlooking the city. What did Patricia find about Northbridge's ownership structure? It's buried under layers of shell companies, but she's tracing the connections. Give her another 2 hours. We don't have 2 hours if they're signing this afternoon. Mariah's phone buzzed with a text from Graham. "Emergency. Can you meet? Have Northbridge draft terms. It's worse than we thought." She showed the message to Nadine. "Call Patricia. Tell her to work faster and get our car ready." 30 minutes later, Graham met Mariah in the parking garage beneath a downtown law firm. He looked pale and carried a manila folder that shook slightly in his hands. "I accessed the draft agreement through the board portal," he said without preamble. "Northbridge isn't rescuing us. They're dismantling us." He opened the folder and spread the papers across the hood of Mariah's car. The terms were devastating. Northbridge would acquire all of Vance Meridian's healthcare patents for 20 cents on the dollar. They would immediately lay off 60% of the workforce. The remaining operations would be sold to competitors within 6 months. Most shocking of all, Elliot would receive a $40 million exit package for facilitating the transition. "He's not saving the company," Graham whispered. "He's being paid to destroy it." Mariah studied the numbers. Thousands of jobs would vanish. Hospitals relying on Vance Meridian's software would lose support. Patients would suffer, while Elliot walked away rich. "Does Vivian know these terms?" I sent them to her an hour ago. She called me twice, but I haven't answered. She's probably panicking. Mariah's phone rang. Vivian Stokes appeared on the caller ID. She answered. "Dr. Bellamy, we need to talk immediately," Vivian said, her usually controlled voice tight with stress. "I've reviewed certain documents that concern me." "The Northbridge terms?" "Yes. There seemed to be aspects that weren't fully explained to the board." Mariah looked at Graham, who nodded grimly. "Ms. Stokes, I'm calling for an emergency board meeting before any signatures are finalized with Northbridge." That would be highly irregular. Elliot has scheduled the signing for this afternoon. Then schedule the meeting for this morning. Unless you're comfortable explaining to shareholders why you approved the liquidation of their company without proper review. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. In the background, Mariah could hear papers shuffling and what sounded like someone pacing. Finally, Vivian spoke. "Emergency board session. Tomorrow morning at 8. But Dr. Bellamy, if you disrupt this process without cause, the liability will be enormous. Ms. Stokes, if you sign that Northbridge agreement without understanding what it really says, the liability will be much worse." The call ended. Graham looked at Mariah with a mixture of hope and fear. "You think we can stop this?" Mariah folded the Northbridge terms and handed them back to him. "We're not stopping anything, Graham. We're going to let them stop themselves." Elliot's phone buzzed at 4:47 a.m. The caller ID showed Vivian Stokes. He answered on the first ring, already knowing what she would say. "There's an emergency board meeting scheduled for 8 this morning," Vivian said, without greeting. Mariah Bellamy requested it. Elliot sat up in his king-sized bed, fury spreading through his chest like acid. "You approved it?" "The Northbridge terms raised questions I couldn't ignore. If we signed that agreement without proper—" "Vivian, listen carefully. Mariah Bellamy is not our savior. She's a predator using that lobby incident to manipulate this board into handing her control of my company. Elliot, the terms show massive layoffs and patent transfers. How do you explain—" "I explain it by winning this war before 8 o'clock. He hung up and immediately called Marcus Chen, his director of communications. "Wake up the crisis team," Elliot ordered. "We're going nuclear." By 6 a.m., Marcus had assembled Elliot's inner circle in the executive conference room. Coffee cups and laptops cluttered the polished table, while Elliot paced near the windows overlooking the awakening city. "Show them the edited footage," Elliot commanded. Marcus pulled up the security video on the main screen. The clip began with Mariah approaching the front desk, but Elliot's contemptuous remarks had been removed. Instead, viewers saw Mariah speaking firmly to Paige, then walking toward the executive elevators without permission. When Elliot appeared on screen, his dialogue had been replaced with audio from later in the confrontation, making it sound like he was responding to Mariah's aggression rather than initiating it. "This makes her look like she was trying to force her way upstairs," Marcus explained. "We removed the part where she identified herself and added captions, suggesting she refused to provide credentials." "Perfect. Release it immediately to every financial news outlet, every business blogger, every corporate security forum." "What's the narrative?" Elliot smiled coldly. "Aggressive investor disrupts private meeting, threatens company leadership, then claims discrimination when properly removed by security." Marcus nodded and began typing on his laptop. "What about the complaint?" "Already drafted." Elliot handed him a folder. "We're filing formal complaints with the SEC and state regulators accusing Bellamy Equity Partners of attempted coercion, market manipulation, and using false discrimination claims to force hostile takeover terms." The room went quiet. Even Marcus looked uncomfortable. "Sir, that could destroy her firm's reputation permanently." "That's the point. She humiliated me in front of my employees. Now I'm going to teach her what real power looks like." By 7:30, the edited footage was trending on financial Twitter. Business reporters shared clips with captions like "Investor meltdown caught on camera" and "When corporate meetings go wrong." Elliot's phone rang constantly, with congratulatory calls from other CEOs praising him for standing firm against activist investor intimidation. But the real devastation came through official channels. Graham received a suspension notice via email, effective immediately. The message cited unauthorized disclosure of confidential information to external parties and potential breach of fiduciary duty. Talia's termination became official that morning. HR cited violation of confidentiality agreements and disruptive behavior threatening workplace harmony. Darius was placed on administrative leave pending investigation after refusing to sign an amended statement claiming Mariah had been verbally aggressive and uncooperative with security protocols. By noon, 3 board members had called Vivian demanding the emergency meeting be cancelled, fearing regulatory scrutiny from the SEC complaint. "We cannot appear to be collaborating with someone under federal investigation," board member Patricia Williams told Vivian over speakerphone. "The optics are toxic," agreed board member Robert Hayes. "If we meet with her now, it looks like we're being coerced." Vivian had no choice. She called Mariah personally to cancel the meeting. "Dr. Bellamy, given the regulatory complaints filed this morning, the board feels it would be inappropriate to—" "I understand," Mariah said quietly. "When will Northbridge sign?" "Tomorrow morning at headquarters." Elliot moved up the timeline. The call ended without pleasantries. Elliot stood in his office that afternoon, watching the edited footage play on 3 different news channels simultaneously. His assistant brought him champagne to celebrate. "Sir, your 2 o'clock is here," she said. "Cancel it. I want to watch this." On screen, a business analyst was explaining how Mariah's aggressive tactics represented everything wrong with modern activist investing. Elliot's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Bellamy's partners are pressuring her to withdraw." 3 major pension funds pulled preliminary interest from her next fundraise. Perfect. That evening, Mariah sat alone in her hotel suite, laptop open on the coffee table. The edited footage played on her screen for the 15th time. She watched herself appear confrontational, demanding, unreasonable. The truth had been surgically removed and replaced with Elliot's version of reality. Her phone showed missed calls from worried partners, concerned investors, and reporters wanting statements. Her firm's reputation was hemorrhaging in real time. For the first time since entering that lobby, Mariah looked tired. Then her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "I have the whole truth. D." Mariah stared at the message, her pulse quickening slightly. She typed back, "When can we meet?" The response came immediately. "Now." The Crossroads. Diner sat nearly empty at 10:30 that night, its neon sign flickering against the Chicago drizzle. Mariah slid into a corner booth, her back to the wall, watching the door. The waitress barely looked up from her magazine. Darius entered 5 minutes later, still wearing his security uniform under a dark jacket. He moved carefully, scanning the room before approaching her table. His face carried the weight of a man who had not slept. "Thank you for coming," Mariah said softly. Darius sat across from her, his hands clasped tightly on the scratched formica table. "I should have done this sooner." The waitress shuffled over with coffee neither of them had ordered. They waited until she was gone before speaking. "The footage they released," Darius began, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's not complete." Mariah leaned forward slightly. "What do you mean?" "My body camera was recording the whole time." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. "Department policy. All interactions get recorded for liability protection. But management only pulled the main security feed for their edit." Mariah's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression calm. "What does your camera show?" "Everything." Darius met her eyes. "You telling the receptionist your name? You saying you had an appointment? You staying calm when Mr. Vance started yelling? Him calling you a liar? Him telling me to treat you like a threat?" He paused, swallowing hard. "It shows me hesitating because I knew something wasn't right. And it shows Mr. Whitlock running out screaming that you were the investor." The diner's fluorescent lights hummed above them. Outside, a car splashed through a puddle. "Why didn't you come forward before?" Mariah asked without judgment. Darius's jaw tightened. "Because they threatened my pension. Because my wife just had surgery. And we need the insurance. Because I'm 52 years old. And good security jobs don't grow on trees." He looked down at his hands. "I was going to stay quiet. Sign their statement. Keep my head down like I've done my whole career." "What changed?" "Talia." His voice hardened. "Watching them fire that young woman for telling the truth. Watching her walk out of that building with a cardboard box while everyone stared. Just like they stared at you." Mariah felt something shift in her chest. She didn't deserve that. Neither did you. Darius looked up. "I've been security for 23 years. Military police before that. I know the difference between someone causing trouble and someone being targeted. You were targeted from the moment you walked in." The door chimed softly as two more figures entered. Nadine Porter moved with purpose, her briefcase in hand, followed by Talia Monroe. Talia looked older than her 29 years, her professional composure strained, but intact. They slid into the booth beside Mariah. Nadine nodded to Darius respectfully. "Ms. Monroe has preserved critical evidence through her legal counsel," Nadine said quietly. "We need to coordinate before moving forward." Talia placed a folder on the table. "Before they locked me out completely, I forwarded everything to my attorney. Emails showing Mr. Vance knew a major investor named Bellamy was coming. Messages where he joked about some desperate money trying to buy in. Instructions to his staff after the lobby incident." She opened the folder carefully. "This one came 6 hours after you left the building." Mariah read the printed email. Elliot's message to his inner circle was brief and brutal. "The Bellamy situation needs to disappear. Find leverage. Discredit her firm. Make this problem go away before Monday's market open." "He didn't hide it," Talia said. "He thought he was untouchable." Nadine's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and looked up. "Mr. Whitlock is joining us securely." She opened her laptop and connected to an encrypted video call. Graham's face appeared on screen, tired but determined. Behind him was what looked like his home office. "Dr. Bellamy," Graham said, "I have the financial records you need. Northbridge isn't just connected to the Shell contracts. It is the Shell contracts. The same numbered accounts, the same signatory authorizations. Elliot has been funneling company money to himself through Northbridge for 8 months." Mariah felt the pieces clicking together. "So, when Northbridge rescues the company, he gets paid twice," Graham finished. "Once through the fraudulent contracts, and again through the acquisition fees. Meanwhile, Northbridge strips the patents, fires half the workforce, and leaves the company worthless." The booth fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerated display case. Mariah looked at each face around the table. 3 people who had risked their careers to preserve the truth. 3 witnesses who refused to let injustice hide behind corporate polish. "We're not leaking this anonymously," she said quietly. "We're walking back in there tomorrow morning and showing everyone exactly what they tried to cover up." Talia nodded firmly. Darius straightened his shoulders. Graham's image flickered, but his expression remained resolute. Nadine opened her briefcase and began removing documents. "Then we do this correctly. Full evidence packets to the board, outside counsel, the forensic auditors, and federal investigators. Everything documented, everything admissible." Mariah pulled out her phone and began typing. The first message went to Vivian Stokes, sent at exactly 11:47 p.m. "Emergency board meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. New evidence requires immediate review before Northbridge signing. This is not a request." She copied the message to every board member, outside counsel, and the lead auditor. Then she composed a second message to Elliot Vance himself. "See you in the morning." The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Mariah slid into the cracked vinyl booth across from Darius. The place was nearly empty, except for a tired waitress wiping down tables and a cook scraping the grill clean. Steam rose from 2 coffee cups between them. Darius looked older than he had in the lobby. Lines creased his forehead. His hands wrapped around his mug like he needed the warmth. "I've been carrying this for 3 days," he said quietly. "It's been eating at me." Mariah waited. She had learned that rushing truth never worked. "My body camera was on during the whole thing," Darius continued. "Standard procedure when there's any kind of disturbance. I record everything until the situation ends." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. "This has the full footage, not the edited version they put online. The whole truth." Mariah stared at the camera. "What does it show?" "You telling that receptionist your name. Calm as anything. You asking for Mr. Whitlock to be called. Then Vance walking in and immediately assuming you didn't belong." Darius's voice grew steadier. "It shows him cutting you off every time you tried to explain. It shows him getting louder when you stayed quiet." The diner door chimed. Mariah looked up to see Talia entering with a woman in a sharp gray suit. "That's my attorney," Mariah said. "Nadine Porter." Talia approached the table, her face tight with exhaustion. Nadine carried a slim briefcase and moved with the precision of someone who had handled corporate warfare before. They slid into the booth. Talia placed a thick folder on the table. "Before they locked me out completely, I saved everything," Talia said. "Emails, meeting notes, performance reviews that got changed after people complained, all legally preserved through my counsel." Darius nodded toward his camera. "The recording shows Mr. Whitlock running out of that elevator, screaming that Dr. Bellamy was the investor. It shows Vance's face when he realized what he'd done." "Why didn't you come forward before?" Mariah asked gently. Darius's jaw tightened. "My wife just had surgery. Cancer. The medical bills are crushing us. I need this job, need the insurance. They told me if I signed a statement saying you were uncooperative, this would all go away quietly. But you didn't sign. I couldn't. Not after they fired Talia for trying to help you. I saw the pattern then. They don't just attack the person causing problems. They go after anyone who tells the truth." Talia opened her folder. "The emails are worse than what I showed you before. Messages where Elliot mocked a major investor named Bellamy coming. Jokes about desperate money trying to buy in. Instructions to his staff after the lobby incident." She pulled out several printed pages. "This one came 6 hours after you left the building." Mariah read the email. Elliot's message to his leadership team was direct and damning. "The Bellamy situation needs to disappear. Find leverage. Discredit her firm. Make this problem go away before Monday's market open." "He documented his own corruption," Nadine observed. "He thought he was untouchable," Talia replied. Nadine's phone buzzed. She checked it and looked up. "Graham Whitlock wants to join us securely. He says he has financial records we need." She opened her laptop and established an encrypted video connection. Graham's face appeared on the screen. He looked haggard but determined. "Dr. Bellamy," Graham said, "I have the complete financial trail. Northbridge Capital isn't just connected to Elliot's shell contracts. It is the shell contracts. Same bank routing numbers, same authorization signatures. He's been stealing from the company for months." Mariah felt pieces falling into place. "So when Northbridge rescues Vance Meridian, he gets paid twice," Graham finished. "Once through the fraudulent invoices, and again through the acquisition fees. Meanwhile, Northbridge strips our patents, fires thousands of workers, and leaves the company worthless." The booth fell silent, except for the hum of kitchen equipment. Mariah looked at each person around her. 3 people who had risked everything to preserve truth. 3 witnesses who refused to let corporate power bury justice. "We're not leaking this anonymously," she said firmly. "We're walking back into that building tomorrow morning and showing everyone exactly what they tried to hide." Nadine opened her briefcase and began removing documents. "Then we do this correctly. Full evidence packets to the board, outside counsel, the forensic auditors, and federal investigators. Everything documented, Everything admissible. Mariah pulled out her phone and began typing. The first message went to Vivian Stokes, sent at exactly 11:47 p.m. Emergency board meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. New evidence requires immediate review before Northbridge signing. This is not a request. She copied the message to every board member, outside counsel, and the lead auditor. Then she composed a second message to Elliot Vance himself. See you in the morning. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Mariah slid into the cracked vinyl booth across from Darius. The place was nearly empty except for a tired waitress wiping down tables and a cook scraping the grill clean. Steam rose from 2 coffee cups between them. Darius looked older than he had in the lobby. Lines creased his forehead. His hands wrapped around his mug like he needed the warmth. "I've been carrying this for 3 days," he said quietly. "It's been eating at me." Mariah waited. She had learned that rushing truth never worked. "My body camera was on during the whole thing," Darius continued. "Standard procedure when there's any kind of disturbance. I record everything until the situation ends." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. "This has the full footage, not the edited version they put online. The whole truth." Mariah stared at the camera. "What does it show?" "You telling that receptionist your name? Calm as anything. You asking for Mr. Whitlock to be called. Then Vance walking in and immediately assuming you didn't belong." Darius's voice grew steadier. "It shows him cutting you off every time you tried to explain. It shows him getting louder when you stayed quiet." The diner door chimed. Mariah looked up to see Talia entering with a woman in a sharp gray suit. "That's my attorney," Mariah said. "Nadine Porter." Talia approached the table, her face tight with exhaustion. Nadine carried a slim briefcase and moved with the precision of someone who had handled corporate warfare before. They slid into the booth. Talia placed a thick folder on the table. "Before they locked me out completely, I saved everything," Talia said. "Emails, meeting notes, performance reviews that got changed after people complained. All legally preserved through my counsel." Darius nodded toward his camera. "The recording shows Mr. Whitlock running out of that elevator, screaming that Dr. Bellamy was the investor. It shows Vance's face when he realized what he'd done." "Why didn't you come forward before?" Mariah asked gently. Darius's jaw tightened. "My wife just had surgery. Cancer. The medical bills are crushing us. I need this job, need the insurance. They told me if I signed a statement saying you were uncooperative, this would all go away quietly. But you didn't sign." "I couldn't. Not after they fired Talia for trying to help you. I saw the pattern then. They don't just attack the person causing problems. They go after anyone who tells the truth." Talia opened her folder. "The emails are worse than what I showed you before. Messages where Elliot mocked a major investor named Bellamy coming. Jokes about desperate money trying to buy in. Instructions to his staff after the lobby incident." She pulled out several printed pages. "This one came 6 hours after you left the building." Mariah read the email. Elliot's message to his leadership team was direct and damning. "The Bellamy situation needs to disappear. Find leverage. Discredit her firm. Make this problem go away before Monday's market open." "He documented his own corruption," Nadine observed. "He thought he was untouchable," Talia replied. Nadine's phone buzzed. She checked it and looked up. "Graham Whitlock wants to join us securely. He says he has financial records we need." She opened her laptop and established an encrypted video connection. Graham's face appeared on the screen. He looked haggard but determined. "Dr. Bellamy," Graham said, "I have the complete financial trail. Northbridge Capital isn't just connected to Elliot's shell contracts. It is the shell contracts. Same bank routing numbers, same authorization signatures. He's been stealing from the company for months." Mariah felt pieces falling into place. "So, when Northbridge rescues Vance Meridian, he gets paid twice," Graham finished. "Once through the fraudulent invoices, and again through the acquisition fees. Meanwhile, Northbridge strips our patents, fires thousands of workers, and leaves the company worthless." The booth fell silent except for the hum of kitchen equipment. Mariah looked at each person around her. 3 people who had risked everything to preserve truth. 3 witnesses who refused to let corporate power bury justice. "We're not leaking this anonymously," she said firmly. "We're walking back into that building tomorrow morning and showing everyone exactly what they tried to hide." Nadine began removing documents from her briefcase. "Then we do this properly. Full evidence packets to the board, outside counsel, forensic auditors, and federal investigators. Everything documented and admissible." Mariah pulled out her phone. The first message went to Vivian Stokes at 11:47 p.m. "Emergency board meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. New evidence requires immediate review before Northbridge signing." She copied every board member, outside counsel, and the lead auditor. Then she typed a second message directly to Elliot Vance. "See you in the morning." The next morning arrived gray and cold. Mariah stepped through the same glass doors where her humiliation had begun 3 days earlier. This time, she carried a leather portfolio containing evidence that would destroy the man who had tried to erase her. Employees gathered near the marble columns, whispering. Word had spread that something major was happening. Paige Naylor looked up from the reception desk with nervous recognition. Darius stood at his security post, meeting Mariah's eyes with a slight nod. Mariah walked directly to the executive elevator without stopping. The boardroom on the 32nd floor buzzed with tense energy. Directors sat stiffly around the polished conference table. Vivian Stokes shuffled papers at the head. Her usual composure cracked. Graham Whitlock sat pale but resolute near the windows. Elliot paced behind his chair like a trapped animal. "This is outrageous," he snapped as Mariah entered with Nadine Porter. "Vivian, you're letting a hostile investor disrupt our Northbridge signing with conspiracy theories." Mariah set her portfolio on the table without responding. Vivian cleared her throat. "The board received evidence packets this morning that require immediate review." "Fabricated evidence," Elliot shot back. "She's desperate because we found better financing." "Then you won't mind us examining the truth," Mariah said quietly. Elliot pointed at her with fury. "I want her removed. She has no standing here. Security should escort her out just like before." The reference to the lobby incident hung in the air like poison. Vivian's voice hardened. "Mr. Vance, Dr. Bellamy is still our potential investor. She will present her concerns." Elliot's face flushed red. "I'm the CEO of this company." "For now," Vivian replied coldly. Mariah connected her laptop to the conference room screen. "Let's start with what really happened in your lobby." She pressed play. Darius's body camera footage filled the wall-mounted display. Crystal clear audio and video from his chest level. The directors watched Mariah approach the reception desk calmly. They heard her identify herself politely. They saw Elliot enter with his executives, scan the lobby, and zero in on her with immediate suspicion. "Can I help you?" his recorded voice asked with barely concealed hostility. "I'm here for the investor meeting." The board watched Elliot laugh dismissively. They heard him cut her off when she gave her name. They saw him gesture toward security, while employees gathered to stare. "I don't know who you think you are, but you're not walking into my building pretending to be important." Director Patricia Wells covered her mouth in shock. Board member Marcus Chen shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The footage continued as Elliot ordered Mariah detained, as Darius reluctantly complied, as Graham burst from the elevator screaming her identity. The recording captured every humiliating second that Elliot's edited version had hidden. When it ended, the boardroom sat in stunned silence. "That's what your CEO did to the woman who came to save your company," Mariah said simply. Elliot's voice cracked with rage. Security procedures require what?" Mariah interrupted. "Assuming black women don't belong in your lobby? Ordering detention without asking questions? Lying to investigators afterward?" Talia stepped forward from where she'd been standing quietly near the door. "The lobby incident wasn't isolated. May I read from internal communications?" Vivian nodded grimly. Talia opened her folder with steady hands. Email from Elliot Vance to senior staff, sent 2 weeks before Dr. Bellamy's arrival. Some investor named Bellamy is supposed to visit. Probably desperate money trying to buy credibility. Keep the meeting short. Several directors exchanged horrified glances. Email sent 6 hours after the lobby confrontation. The Bellamy situation needs to disappear. Find leverage. Discredit her firm. Make this problem go away before Monday's market open. Talia's voice grew stronger. Email to HR regarding my termination. Talia Monroe showed poor judgment by speaking with unauthorized persons. Recommend immediate separation to prevent further security risks. She looked directly at Elliot. He fired me for telling the truth about what I witnessed. Graham stood slowly. The financial evidence is equally damning. He activated his own laptop, displaying spreadsheets and bank records. Northbridge Capital routes payments through the same accounts as our inflated vendor contracts. Same routing numbers. Same authorization signatures. Elliot has been stealing from this company for 8 months. The numbers filled the screen. Consulting fees to shell companies, equipment purchases that never arrived, emergency loans that disappeared into private accounts. The Northbridge deal isn't a rescue, Graham continued. It's the final theft. They acquire our patents for pennies, fire thousands of workers, and award Elliot a $40 million exit package for orchestrating the sale. Elliot exploded. You're all traitors. Graham, I trusted you. Vivian, this woman is trying to steal my company. Your company? Nadine Porter spoke for the first time, her attorney's voice cutting through his hysteria. Mr. Vance, federal investigators are already in this building. Evidence preservation notices have been served on IT, HR, and accounting. Your personal devices were seized 1 hour ago. Elliot's face went white. You can't. We can, and we did, Nadine continued. Wire fraud, embezzlement, and civil rights violations carry serious federal penalties. Vivian stood at the head of the table, her hands shaking slightly but her voice firm. The board has a fiduciary duty to protect this company and its stakeholders. Vivian, don't do this, Elliot said, his tone shifting to desperate pleading. I built this company. I made you rich. You can't let them destroy me. You destroyed yourself, Vivian replied. I call for an immediate vote of no confidence in CEO Elliot Vance. Elliot stepped toward her, his voice turning menacing. You think you can betray me? I have dirt on half this board. I'll burn everything down before I let you. Mr. Vance, Vivian interrupted, steel in her voice. Sit down, or security will escort you out. The threat hung in the boardroom air like a blade. All in favor of removing Elliot Vance as chief executive officer, effective immediately. Every hand around the table rose without hesitation. The vote is unanimous, Vivian announced. Mr. Vance, you are no longer CEO of Vance Meridian Technologies. Elliot stood frozen at the head of the boardroom table, his face flushed red with rage and disbelief. The unanimous vote echoed in the silence like a death sentence. Outside counsel approached him with practiced efficiency. Mr. Vance, I need your company phone, laptop, access badge, and any other corporate property in your possession. No, Elliot's voice cracked. This is my company. I built it from nothing. You can't just take everything I've worked for. The lawyer extended his hand patiently. Sir, these items belong to Vance Meridian Technologies, not to you personally. Please hand them over. Elliot clutched his phone tighter. I won't do it. This is theft, corporate sabotage. I'll sue every one of you. Vivian's voice cut through his desperation like ice. Elliot, Vance Meridian Technologies belongs to its shareholders, its employees, the patients who depend on our healthcare platforms, and the law. It never belonged to you alone. I made you people rich, Elliot screamed, pointing at the board members. Without me, this company would be nothing. You'd all be nothing. Without us, Vivian replied coldly, you'd still be selling insurance in your father's strip mall office. The door opened, and 2 federal investigators stepped into the boardroom. Both wore dark suits and carried badges that gleamed under the conference room lights. Mr. Vance, the lead investigator said calmly, please do not leave this building without speaking with us first. We have questions regarding financial irregularities and potential civil rights violations. Elliot's face went pale. "I want my lawyer." "That's your right," the investigator nodded. "But you're not leaving until we're finished." The second investigator looked at outside counsel. "We'll need those corporate devices preserved as evidence. Chain of custody protocols apply immediately." Elliot finally surrendered his phone and laptop, his hands shaking with fury. He ripped off his access badge and threw it onto the mahogany table. "Fine. Take it all. But this isn't over." Vivian pressed a button on the conference phone. "Security to the executive boardroom immediately." Minutes later, the door opened again. Darius Cole entered, flanked by two other security officers. But this time, Darius walked with calm authority, his uniform crisp, his bearing professional and unshakable. "Mr. Vance," Darius said evenly, "please come with us." Elliot stared at him with pure hatred. "You? You're going to escort me out? After everything I did for you? I gave you a job when no one else would hire an ex-soldier." Darius met his gaze without flinching. "You gave me a job, sir, but you also ordered me to put my hands on an innocent woman. Those aren't the same thing. She was trespassing." "No, sir," Darius replied quietly. "She was invited. You just didn't want to listen." The investigators flanked Elliot as Darius led the procession out of the boardroom. They walked down the same executive hallway where Talia had been fired, past the same elevator where Graham had frantically run to save Mariah, toward the same lobby where everything had started. Employees gathered along the marble columns just as they had 3 days earlier, but this time they watched their former CEO being escorted out in disgrace. Phones lifted to record the moment. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Paige sat behind the front desk, her eyes lowered in shame. She remembered checking her computer system, finding no appointment, treating Mariah like she was lost. Now she understood what she had helped happen. Talia stood near the executive elevators, no longer afraid to be seen, no longer worried about retaliation. She watched Elliot pass with steady eyes. Mariah remained near the marble pillars where she had been grabbed 3 days ago. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply observed justice taking its course. Elliot tried to glare at Darius as they approached the front doors. "You think you're a hero? You're just another security guard who follows orders." Darius paused for a moment, his voice carrying across the lobby. "Sometimes the most important order is the one you refuse to follow." The heavy glass doors opened. Federal investigators guided Elliot toward the waiting cars outside. The same doors where he had ordered Mariah to be dragged out now framed his own exit. As Elliot disappeared into the Chicago morning, Mariah spoke quietly, her words carrying in the marble silence. "Truth has a memory, even when powerful men forget." Later that afternoon, the boardroom felt different. The same mahogany table, the same floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago's skyline. But the tension had shifted from desperation to possibility. Mariah sat across from Vivian Stokes, who looked older than she had that morning. Graham Whitlock occupied the chair where Elliot had commanded just hours before, his shoulders straighter, but his expression humble. Talia Monroe sat at the table for the first time, no longer relegated to taking notes from the corner. Darius Cole stood near the door in his security uniform, present not as muscle, but as a witness to change. Nadine Porter had her legal documents spread before her. Outside counsel sat quietly, ready to formalize whatever agreement emerged. "The $340 million remains available," Mariah began, her voice steady. "But not under the same terms we discussed 3 days ago." Vivian nodded carefully. "What are your conditions?" Mariah opened her leather portfolio. "First, this company will establish an independent ethics office with full authority to investigate complaints, review executive decisions, and report directly to the board. No more buried reports, no more disappeared complaints." She looked at Talia. "Second, Ms. Monroe will be reinstated immediately and promoted to Vice President of Ethics and Employee Accountability. Her salary will reflect that position, and she will have direct access to all personnel files, executive communications, and company policies." Talia's eyes widened. Graham nodded his approval. Vivian made notes on her tablet. Third, Mariah continued, every executive who participated in retaliation, discrimination, or financial misconduct will be removed within 30 days. No golden parachutes. No quiet resignations. Public accountability. Vivian's pen stopped moving. That could include several senior staff members. Then you should have chosen better senior staff, Mariah replied without sympathy. Fourth, this company will create the Bellamy Access Fund, named for my father, David Bellamy. It will provide healthcare technology and medical equipment to underserved communities. 5% of annual profits will fund this program. The room was silent. Graham leaned forward. Dr. Bellamy, that's significant. My father died because he couldn't afford the medical care he needed after 30 years of cleaning offices owned by men who never learned his name, Mariah said quietly. This company will not repeat that indifference. She turned to Darius. Fifth, Mr. Cole will become Director of Security Standards. He will retrain the entire security department on dignity, bias prevention, and lawful conduct. Never again will this lobby be a place where assumptions determine how people are treated. Darius straightened, surprise and gratitude crossing his face. Sixth, Mariah continued, employees will have representation on the company oversight committee. Workers who built this company deserve a voice in how it operates. Vivian set down her pen. And if we agree to these terms, then Vance Meridian survives. Thousands of people keep their jobs. Hospitals keep their software. Patients keep their care. The alternative is bankruptcy, liquidation, and failure. Graham cleared his throat. Before we proceed, I need to say something publicly. He looked directly at the outside counsel. My silence helped Elliot's culture survive. I knew complaints were being ignored. I saw employees being pushed out. I did nothing because I was afraid for my own position. The room held its breath. I'm not making excuses, Graham continued. Fear is not a defense for allowing injustice. If this board appoints me interim CEO, I will work every day to earn the trust I failed to protect. Vivian studied him carefully. That's quite an admission, Graham. It's the truth, he replied. And this company has had enough lies. Nadine spoke for the first time. The documents are ready for signature if the board approves these terms. Vivian looked around the table. The other directors who had joined by video conference nodded their agreement one by one. All in favor of accepting Dr. Bellamy's investment terms? Every hand rose. Mariah signed the investment agreement with the same pen she had carried into the building 3 days earlier. But now, the signatures meant something different. They meant accountability. They meant change. 3 weeks later, Mariah stepped through the glass doors of Vance Meridian Technologies, carrying a simple leather briefcase instead of rescue documents. The lobby looked the same, but everything felt different. Good morning, Dr. Bellamy, Paige said from behind the front desk, her voice warm and respectful. Mr. Whitlock is expecting you in Conference Room B. Thank you, Paige. Near the marble pillars where employees had once gathered to watch her humiliation, a small bronze plaque now hung on the wall. The Bellamy Access Fund, expanding healthcare with dignity. In memory of David Bellamy, 1943-2019. Mariah paused before it, remembering her father's calloused hands and quiet strength. Dr. Bellamy? Talia approached from the elevator bank, wearing a navy blazer with a new confidence in her stride. I'm heading upstairs to lead the new employee ethics training. Would you like to observe? I'd be honored. They rode the elevator together, the same car where Graham had frantically explained the confidential appointment system. Now, Talia carried a tablet full of policy reforms and training materials. In the conference room, Graham presented quarterly reports with cautious optimism. The company had stabilized. Stock prices had recovered after the leadership change. The Patient Access Fund had already provided medical equipment to 4 community clinics. The ethics office has processed 12 complaints in 3 weeks, Talia reported. All were investigated fully. 3 resulted in management changes. Employees are starting to trust the system. Darius appeared in the doorway. "Dr. Bellamy? There's a family in the lobby asking for a tour. A grandmother and her granddaughter. The little girl heard about the company from a news story." Mariah smiled. "Let's go meet them." Back in the lobby, a black woman in her 70s stood with a girl who couldn't have been more than 8 years old. The child stared at the bronze plaque with wide, curious eyes. "Are you the lady from the television?" the grandmother asked Mariah gently. "I might be." The little girl looked up at Mariah with complete directness. "My grandma says you made the mean man go away. Are you the one who owns this place now?" Mariah knelt down to the child's eye level, her voice soft but clear. "No, sweetheart. I'm the woman who reminded them these doors were never meant for only one kind of person." I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.